The Xylar Dominion had long ago ceased to find novelty in conquest. Their fleets moved from system to system like a tide of iron, grinding down resistance and sweeping up tribute. For Commander Vare, it had become routine, a cycle of bombardment, surrender, and the hollow theatrics of negotiations that always ended with the same signature on the same treaty. He no longer counted the worlds subdued under his watch. The names of those planets mattered little. What mattered was that the Dominion expanded, and he played his part. As his flagship hovered above the shattered surface of a frontier colony, Vare leaned against the polished railing of the command deck and let his mandibles flex in mild irritation. Another settlement had burned. Another species had bent the knee. The spectacle was stale. He had expected the humans to offer something different. He had heard whispers that they clung stubbornly to their independence, that they still believed in defending what could not possibly be defended. He hoped they would at least scream more colorfully than these poor creatures whose ruined cities drifted in firestorms below. His adjutant, a younger officer eager to please, approached. High Command has chosen you, Commander, to oversee the human situation. They require a demonstration that will break the Terran's will before any negotiations are entertained. Vare allowed a low click of amusement to escape. Negotiations. Always negotiations. Very well. Humans it is. I trust they are ready to understand the futility of resistance. The Dominion Council had convened days earlier, cloaked in ritual arrogance. Their intelligence briefings portrayed Earth as a backwater sphere of sentimental bipeds. Primitive fleets, outdated weaponry, a culture obsessed with ceremony and stubborn pride. No challenge to the Dominion's overwhelming might. The Council's conclusion had been unanimous. Dispatch a fleet, level a few colonies, let the humans glimpse the scale of power arrayed against them. After that, a treaty and submission. It would be efficient, bloodless, inevitable. Vare had believed it without hesitation. Empires did not lie to themselves unless they were very sure of victory. He agreed to serve as envoy, though he privately considered the role a farce. Envoys were not needed when the outcome had been written centuries in advance. Now, as his fleet slipped from hyperspace into the human system, he studied the blue and green planet spinning quietly at the heart of Sol. It looked fragile, vulnerable, almost laughably small compared to the vast blackness around it. His officers exchanged lazy remarks about its oceans and forests, marveling at how such a species could think itself important. Vare said nothing. He had seen hundreds of worlds like this, and they had all ended the same way. A signal pulsed across the deck, a human transmission, spoken in a calm monotone that carried no hint of desperation. Unidentified fleet, you are trespassing in Sol space. Withdraw immediately. The bridge erupted with derisive laughter. Officers leaned back in their seats, mocking the clipped accent, repeating the words as though they were a joke. Vare allowed them their moment, though the tone of the message lodged faintly in his thoughts. He had expected threats or begging. This voice had offered neither. He ordered a demonstration. A lunar outpost had been identified as symbolic but expendable. The fleet's batteries fired, reducing the installation to molten rubble. A second volley carved a scar across the barren surface, visible even from Earth. A message in ash: resist and you will be erased. He waited for the panic, the cries for negotiation, the stammering diplomats demanding terms. Instead, Earth answered with silence. Hours passed. No surrender broadcast, no attempt at frantic diplomacy. Their channels buzzed with activity, but none of it directed at him. Human voices murmured to one another, steady, businesslike, as if preparing for an event they had anticipated long before his arrival. Vare felt an unfamiliar pressure behind his sternum, a twinge of unease. He masked it with a gesture of indifference, brushing off his officers' whispered questions. Yet as he stood on the command deck, watching that quiet planet below, he could not shake the sense that he had stepped into something more intricate than the Council's reports suggested. Perhaps they are too stunned to respond, one officer offered. Perhaps, Vare murmured, though the word lacked conviction. The silence stretched on, taut as a wire. He imagined the humans waiting, neither cowed nor pleading, simply observing. As though they had chosen not to react on his terms at all. For the first time in his long career, the script of conquest did not unfold as expected. There were no cries of terror, no desperate ambassadors pleading for their people's survival. There was only that vast, quiet planet and the unreadable minds behind it. Vare narrowed his eyes toward Earth and felt the certainty of routine slip away. Something was wrong here, profoundly wrong. And though he could not yet name it, he sensed the Dominion had just made a mistake that would echo across the galaxy. The first explosion was not what Vare expected. Dominion scanners had identified the human colonies scattered across the system as vulnerable outposts, meager defenses, low population counts, symbolic more than strategic. Yet when his strike wings descended upon the Martian settlement, the targets fractured into blinding storms of electromagnetic discharge. 3 Dominion cruisers went dark instantly, their systems fried as though lightning had crawled into their cores. On his command deck, alarm screamed, officers struggled to recover, and Vare stood motionless, mandibles drawn tight in disbelief. "This cannot be their doing," one of his subcommanders insisted, but even as he spoke, another wave of energy cascaded through the fleet. A dozen ships reeled, and 2 collided, tearing each other apart. The Dominion had expected a slaughter of defenseless civilians. Instead, they had walked willingly into a net. Then came the voice again, steady and unshaken, carried on every Dominion frequency. "You have fired first. We will now respond. This was your choice." The words cut through the chaos like a blade of ice. They were not shouted. They did not threaten. They simply declared a fact. Vare's breath came shallow, though he forced his tone to remain calm. "Locate the source. Trace that broadcast now." His officers obeyed, but none could fix the origin. The transmission seemed to come from everywhere at once. Moments later, space itself seemed to shift. Beyond the frozen plains of Neptune, something stirred. At first Vare thought it was an asteroid tumbling through the void, then he realized it was far too symmetrical. Hull plating gleamed faintly in the dim light, absorbing rather than reflecting. Massive engines awoke with a pulse that rippled across sensor arrays, dwarfing any power reading his fleet had ever recorded. A human warship emerged. Not a warship, an abomination. Larger than any Dominion dreadnought, yet sleek, stripped of ornament, designed with the brutal economy of purpose. It bore no banners, no arrogant flares of light. It moved as though silence itself had been given form. "Designation unknown," his analysts muttered, voices trembling. "Configuration not in records. Its displacement. Commander, it is beyond classification." Vare stared, and for a moment he felt the absurd urge to laugh. The humans had hidden this. While the Dominion mocked their weakness, they had built a predator and left it sleeping in the dark until now. The ship spoke at last, though not in words. A single lance of coherent energy erupted from its hull, carving through a Dominion destroyer as though it were air. No blast, no spectacle, just a clean line of annihilation. Another shot followed, then another, each one placed with surgical precision. Within minutes, 6 Dominion vessels had been reduced to drifting carcasses. Vare's officers shouted for counterattacks, for evasive maneuvers, but none of it mattered. The human ship anticipated them, firing not where his fleet was, but where it would be seconds later. Every move played into its calculations. Vare ordered all ships to scatter, yet even in dispersion they fell like prey animals before a hunter that had studied their every instinct. On his display, he tracked smaller human craft emerging from hidden positions, fighters and frigates, not in vast numbers, but moving with uncanny coordination. They darted between Dominion lines, striking with pinpoint accuracy, vanishing before retaliation could land. Their formations were disciplined, almost mechanical, but the fluidity suggested something more than drills. It was as if the humans had rehearsed this exact battle. Vare felt his jaw tighten. This was not improvisation. This was not desperation. It was preparation. The humans had expected the Dominion to come. He thought of Earth's silence after his demonstration strike. Not fear. Not shock. A pause. as though they were waiting for a cue to begin. And he, blind in his arrogance, had given it to them. The name of the warship reached him at last, filtered through intercepted communications. Erebus. The humans called their creation after some ancient myth, a god of shadow and death. A fitting choice, Ver thought grimly, as he watched its silhouette carve across the void. In the chaos, he retreated to his quarters, ordering his officers to stabilize the remnants of the fleet. Alone, he activated a private channel and summoned archival fragments of human history. If he was to face this enemy, he needed to understand them. Images unfolded before him, grainy footage of trenches filled with mud and blood, steel machines grinding across shattered landscapes, firestorms devouring cities under clouds shaped like mushrooms. He watched soldiers advance despite impossible losses, civilians rebuilding in the ashes of annihilation, leaders speaking of peace while sharpening their knives. He felt his stomach twist. These creatures had not merely endured war. They had been forged by it. Every century another catastrophe, every generation another struggle. He had dismissed their brutality as primitive noise. Now he realized it was memory, imprinted across their species, a reflex as old as fire. The Dominion fought for dominance, for expansion, for tribute. Humanity fought to survive. And survival had taught them ruthlessness no empire could match. When he returned to the bridge, the battle had not ended. It had shifted. The Dominion fleet was scattered, diminished, yet the Erebus had not pressed to exterminate. Instead, the humans held their ground, weapons quiet but ready, a predator content to let the wounded flock drift apart. They had made their point. Should we regroup for another assault? His adjutant asked, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his doubt. Ver studied the monstrous outline of the Erebus and shook his head slowly.
No.
Not tonight. For the first time in decades, he tasted the sour bite of fear. It was not for his life or his fleet. It was for the future of his people, for an empire that had walked into the shadow of something it did not understand. As the Dominion survivors limped toward retreat vectors, the calm human voice returned once more, not gloating, not triumphant, merely certain. This war ends on our terms. Ver lowered his gaze to the floor, knowing those words were not a threat but a prophecy. And it was one the Dominion was powerless to prevent. The Dominion Council Chamber was a cathedral of power, lined with banners woven from the skins of extinct species, its air thick with the musk of authority. Admirals, ministers, and governors reclined in tiers of polished stone, each convinced of their own indispensability. Ver stood in the center pit, the light of scrutiny pouring down on him like a blade. His armor, still scorched from the encounter at Seoul, felt heavier than iron. He spoke plainly, without the flattery that lubricated most political proceedings. The humans are not as you believe. They do not rely on negotiation. They do not posture for honor. They prepare, in silence, for survival. When you struck their colonies, you struck bait. When you saw weakness, they showed you only what they wanted you to see. A chorus of laughter rippled through the chamber. A minister, folds of silk draped over his corpulent frame, wagged a jeweled finger. Commander, your retreat has curdled your judgment. A handful of losses and you elevate primitives into monsters. Shall we tremble at every stone that rolls across our path? Ver's mandibles clicked in frustration. You did not see the vessel they call Erebus. It dismantled an armada, without ceremony, as if swatting insects. Every movement calculated, every strike inevitable. I warn you, this was no accident. They have built in secret what we cannot match. An admiral sneered, his metals clinking as he shifted. All ships fall when surprised. You speak of human cunning, yet you admit your own failure. Perhaps your caution is simply shame. The chamber roared with amusement. Ver stood alone, heat rising behind his eyes. He wanted to shout that shame was a luxury, survival was not. Yet he forced himself still, because anger would serve only their mockery. When the laughter faded, the High Chancellor's voice cut through, deep and resonant. The Dominion has endured 10,000 years. No backwater race will undo us. You will regroup, Commander, and lead the next wave. Show us their supposed monsters bleed, as all others do. The decree left no space for dissent. Vare bowed stiffly, though inside he felt a weight sink deeper. He had seen the eyes of predators before, but never on the faces of prey. That paradox haunted him now. Outside the chamber, his adjutant matched his stride, voice low. You warned them, yet they will not listen. They cannot, Vare muttered. To admit the threat would be to admit weakness, and weakness is the one thing they have forgotten how to face. He paused, mandibles tightening. But I have not forgotten. In the days that followed, reports trickled in. Disturbances along supply routes, forward bases going dark, colonies falling silent without a single distress call. When Vare studied the data, a pattern emerged: no conquests, no massacres, only precise amputations of the Dominion's ability to strike. The humans were not trying to destroy, they were unmaking, cutting out the Empire's nerves until the body lay paralyzed. One transmission chilled him most of all. A Dominion refueling station had been seized intact. Surveillance drones captured the moment human troops advanced, disciplined, faceless behind featureless visors, moving in uncanny unison. Their commander offered the garrison a single line before jamming communications. We will not destroy you. We will erase your capacity for war. Vare replayed that phrase until it etched itself in his skull. It was not cruelty, nor mercy, it was inevitability. The humans did not see themselves as conquerors or saviors. They were executioners of an equation the Dominion had failed to understand. Whispers spread among the lower ranks. Soldiers asked if Earth was a myth come to punish arrogance, if the old prophecies of empires ending in shadows had finally found form. Civilians rioted on border worlds, terrified by rumors of invisible fleets appearing and vanishing before defenders could respond. The word Terran became a curse in the marketplaces, spat with fear rather than hatred. In his private quarters, Vare immersed himself further in human history, compelled to know the architects of his dread. He saw footage of cities rebuilt atop ruins, of armies clawing victory from hopeless odds. He studied faces hardened by famine, warlords who turned defeat into empire, revolutions that devoured their own creators. He recognized something the Dominion had long ago lost: the will to adapt, to fight when survival demanded cruelty. The humans carried it still, in every generation, as if their planet itself had taught them never to rest. His adjutant found him one night, staring at images of a mushroom cloud blooming over scorched earth. "What is it you see in them, Commander?" the young officer asked, voice hushed as though entering a shrine. Vare's mandibles shifted slowly. "I see a species that does not fear the abyss. They built their civilization beside it, brick by brick, and learned to smile at the smoke. Tell me, how do you defeat a people who have already survived their own extinction?" The officer offered no answer. None was possible. Word arrived soon after. A grand fleet was to be assembled, the largest in centuries, to descend upon Earth and crush resistance in one decisive blow. The Council declared it would be swift, glorious, a reminder to the galaxy that the Dominion tolerated no challengers. Vare listened to the proclamation with hollow silence. He imagined that vast armada slipping into Sol, banners high, arrogance intact, and then vanishing into the jaws of Erebus. He imagined the humans waiting patiently, knowing precisely how and when to strike, as if they had written the script of the battle themselves. On the eve of departure, he stood on the bridge of his flagship, gazing into the stars. Doubt gnawed at him, not for his own survival but for the legacy of his empire. He had lived his life believing conquest was eternal, that the Dominion was an ocean without end. Yet now he felt the tide receding, and beyond it, a new horizon rising in human form. When the fleet set course for Earth, a strange quiet settled over him. It was not resignation, nor defiance, but the awareness that history was about to pivot. He would play his role, as duty demanded, but in the hollow of his chest he already knew. The Dominion was not marching to victory. It was marching to revelation. And somewhere, in the cold dark beyond Neptune, The Erebus was waiting. The Dominion armada unfolded across the void like a continent of steel, thousands of ships gleaming with pride and certainty. Ver stood at the prow of his flagship, gazing out at the endless array of banners and hulls, the collective force of 1,000 years of conquest. To the Council, it was proof of inevitability. To Ver, it was a pyre waiting for a spark. The fleet cut through hyperspace in silence, emerging into the Sol system with all the subtlety of a thunderclap. Planets shimmered in the distance, and Earth turned slowly beneath its shield of clouds. Officers cheered, convinced the humans would now understand futility. Yet Ver's mandibles tightened as his sensors painted a different story. There were no defensive walls raised in panic, no fleets arrayed in desperate formation. The humans had not come out to meet them in chaos. They waited. The Erebus appeared without flourish, a shadow rising from nothingness, its dark hull blotting out stars. Smaller vessels rippled into existence around it, not by the slow crawl of hyperspace entry, but through sudden punctures in reality itself, wormhole apertures opening with eerie calm. Entire squadrons of Terran craft poured through, already in formation, as though the humans had rehearsed every second of this unveiling. "Impossible," one of Ver's subcommanders whispered, voice cracking. "No species manipulates space with such precision." The Erebus answered not with words but with action. Its weapons ignited in silence, beams cutting across the armada with surgical brutality. A Dominion dreadnought disintegrated in an instant, its shield flaring and collapsing before its crew understood what had struck. Fighters screamed toward the Terran lines, only to vanish into invisible nets of drones that moved like extensions of a single will. Every Dominion tactic, every maneuver that had once brought them certainty, unraveled against an enemy who had already mapped them. Ver barked orders, his voice calm even as the battlefield dissolved into ruin. "Adaptive formations, break their lines. Do not cluster, do not give them patterns." But the humans anticipated even this, their fleets folding and unfolding like a blade of light, shifting with terrifying fluidity. Where the Dominion scattered, the humans constricted. Where the Dominion massed, the humans evaporated, only to strike at exposed flanks seconds later. He realized, with an ache that hollowed his chest, that this was no battle. This was a lesson. Humanity was not fighting the Dominion as equals. They were dismantling it piece by piece, showing the galaxy that its once mighty predator was nothing more than an animal bleeding in the dust. Across the bridge, his officers trembled. Some shouted for retreat, others demanded a suicidal charge. Ver silenced them with a single raised hand. "You will not shame yourselves further," he said, voice quiet but unyielding. "You will bear witness. That is all that remains." On the main display, the Erebus drifted forward, its vast guns falling silent after each perfect volley. It did not rush to annihilate, did not indulge in excess. It killed with restraint, precision, inevitability. The silence between its strikes was louder than the detonations themselves, a silence that told Ver exactly what the humans wanted him to feel: inevitability. As Dominion ships crumbled, a transmission crackled across every channel, carrying not the voice of a politician or warrior, but the calm timbre that had haunted Ver since the first encounter. "You forced our hand. We will not exterminate you. But understand this: your age of war is over. We will decide when and how you may lift a weapon again." The bridge crew froze, every pair of eyes locking on their commander. They waited for him to rage, to order defiance, to cling to the dignity of resistance. Instead, Ver lowered his head. In that single moment, he accepted what none of the Council had been able to admit. The Dominion had met its successor, and it would not survive the encounter unchanged. The battle dragged on for hours, though the outcome had been decided within minutes. When the last Dominion carrier buckled and burned, the Erebus ceased its fire. Human vessels fanned out, occupying lanes, disarming survivors with chilling efficiency. There were no celebrations, no roars of triumph, only the cold rhythm of an operation carried out to completion. Later, under escort of Terran craft, Ver stood within a chamber aboard the Erebus. Its walls were bare, its lighting soft, its silence oppressive. Before him stood a single human officer, eyes steady, posture unadorned by ornament or arrogance. "You are Commander Ver," the human said. It was not a question. "I am," Ver answered, his voice low. He expected humiliation, interrogation, perhaps even execution. Instead, the human's words carried a strange weight of finality. "You will return to your people. Not as a prisoner, not as a hero. As a voice. Tell them this war is concluded. Tell them the Dominion has a choice: serve a new order or vanish. There will not be another warning." Ver stared into those steady eyes and felt the shiver of understanding course through him. The humans did not hate his kind. They did not hunger for revenge. They simply did not intend to ever be threatened again. Their mercy was more terrifying than cruelty because it was deliberate, calculated, and utterly without weakness. He bowed his head, not out of deference, but acknowledgement. "I will tell them, and they will not believe me." The officer inclined his head. "They will. In time. Fear is persuasive." When Ver returned to the remnants of his empire, he found the council shattered, their authority reduced to whispers in the face of panic spreading across the stars. Civilians demanded surrender. Soldiers deserted. Governors sealed their worlds, praying the humans would overlook them. The Dominion had not merely lost a battle, it had lost the illusion of supremacy that had sustained it for millennia. Ver addressed the council one final time. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with the calm certainty he had learned from his enemies. "The galaxy is changed. The humans are awake, and they will not return to slumber. We may join them or be erased. The choice is ours." Silence followed, heavier than any argument. He saw fear flicker in the eyes of those who once mocked him, and in that moment, he knew the Dominion's age was done. In the quiet of his quarters, he allowed himself reflection. He had spent a lifetime carrying the pride of empire, the certainty of dominance. Now he carried something else: respect for a species that had risen from fragility to mastery through endless trial. A species that had stared into its own abyss and taught itself to survive. He remembered the first words he had heard from them: "Withdraw immediately." He understood now that it had never been a plea. It had been a promise. And as he gazed into the stars, he whispered to himself the truth he would never escape. The galaxy had awakened a predator that wore civilization like a mask, and it would never again be fooled into pretending weakness.